Excellent. Good evening. It is Wednesday, March 29th, 2023, 6:20 p.m. This is the PAB, this is the public advisory. The PAB is resuming in-person meetings and encourages community members to attend in person. Community members attending in person should observe that as the safety protocols. In-person meetings of the boards and commissions as by the city of Brooklyn. The PAB acknowledges that physical attendance may not be feasible for all community members. To this end, the Office of the Director of Police Accountability has been exploring the option of allowing for remote participation at the PAB meetings. Please note that the LPPA and the PAB are in the early stages of implementing this hybrid meeting format, so there is a possibility for technical glitches and errors. Your patience and understanding are greatly appreciated. Practicing this meeting remotely. Join from the PC back, I've kind of like the new device. You can leave URL, this is below. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, you can drop down the menu and click on rename. You can name yourself to the anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. You join by phone, dial 1-669-500-6833. And a ring ID 826-5359-6072. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press *9 and wait to be recognized. This brings us to land acknowledgement. The city of Berkeley recognizes the community we live in, developing the territory of the traditional, the ancestral, unceded land, the children world, speaking along with the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign of our own land, about the account. This land was and continues to be a great importance to all of the tribes and descendants of the Lord. As we begin our meeting tonight, we acknowledge all of the inhabitants and documented their history of environmental at the west of the shoulder, and the Ohlone people who continue to reside in the East Bay. We recognize that Berkeley's residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded stolen land and simply through Berkeley's corporation in 1878. The towards the laws regulating the city of Berkeley is very vital to recognize the history of this land, but also recognize the Ohlone people are present members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. Bring this to our agenda. This is the integration to the African communities. Would you like to say something?
Just a quick reminder that we are in person, so if you're here with us, please be mindful we can't mute you like we can do on Zoom. We ask that if you are picking up the microphones or maybe here in front of the table, they do have ways that just capture the front of the room, but members of the public that are present here, they can step a little closer so we can make sure the members of the public gathering online are able to hear us.
The consensus of the call to order.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and start with roll call. Chair Moore.
Here.
Vice Chair Harris.
Here.
Board Member Calavita.
Here.
Board Member Leftwich.
Here.
Board Member Levine. And Board Member Owens.
Here.
Okay, all present. We have quorum. I do note that on behalf of staff, we have Director Aguilar, myself, Jose Murillo, the policy analyst. On behalf of the BPD, we have Lieutenant Kevin Reese, as well as Captain Durbin.
Excellent.
And sorry, one more thing. And then from the DCA's office, we do have a DCA Mattis on the line.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That brings me to agenda item number 3, the approval of the agenda. Any comments, concerns, questions? Anybody would like to move anything around?
I would like to withdraw an item 11A rule 2. I'm not prepared to speak to that tonight, but I like to withdraw that new business item. A I.
Excellent. Is there any objection to that? Is everyone okay with that? Any motion?
Second.
Excellent. Seeing that I have any, votes against that, we'll go ahead and move forward to agenda item number 4, public comment.
Okay, so as part of our public comment procedures, we'll begin with folks that are in person before proceeding to the members of the public joining us virtually. At this time, are there any members of the public who are here and would like to speak? Okay, one moment while I get the timer up.
Very briefly, I just want to thank the members of the staff in particular and the director for the very careful and thorough work that you've done in terms of responding to requests for further information. There's just so much material we put together. It's impressive and it's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other members of the public here present that would like to make any public comment? Okay. Hearing none, I will proceed to the virtual attendees. Okay, first up is Emily from the Berkeley Scanner. Emily, you have been granted permission to speak. We do have a timer running here for 3 minutes.
Thank you. It won't take that long, and I don't know how the audio is in the room. I would come, but I'm sick, so I just want to report on the audio situation from afar. The board, I can hear Mr. Murillo very clearly, and that's excellent, but pretty much everyone else sounds like they're underwater, particularly the chair. I don't know if there's a way to move the mic closer to him, but it really sounds extremely garbled and unintelligible from the remote listening. So thank you all for your efforts. I know I'm not blaming anyone. I know we're in a transitional time, but I just kind of wanted you to know how it is. And I will also note I was at a city meeting in person recently where another member of the public was also reporting a lot of difficulty with the meeting audio from a prior PAB meeting. So anything folks can do to make it clearer would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
If I may,
Please.
we can move the camera, we're gonna have to sacrifice probably the radius to move the mic a little bit closer, is that okay?
So this order.
Yeah.
Why don't you have it on your laptop so you can see what it's looking like?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then which one is the?
And then could any of the board members just test the mic?
Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Captain Durbin, was that more audible?
It's better, yeah, it's better, but not great, but better.
I'll try to project, I'll use my finger quotes.
Is that better?
I think it's better.
I think it's better.
Okay. perfect. Okay. Thank you for that feedback. With that, I'll proceed to the next speaker. And that was the previous speaker's time. Okay. Okay, Sedar, you have been granted time to speak. The timer has started for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Sagar Jitani, and I'm a father of adult children who both attend UC Berkeley. I'm part of a group of about 1,000 Cal parents who have been watching with growing concern the rise in violent crime taking place around the city of Berkeley. Last week, Interim Chief Jen Lewis reported that violent and property crime was at a 10-year high in Berkeley. And as some of you may know, about 10 days ago, a group of Cal students were robbed at gunpoint on 4th Street while they were shooting a student film. Just 2 days ago, another Cal student was robbed at gunpoint at about 10:30 in the morning in the middle of the CVS parking lot. The feeling I have, and I think I speak for a number of parents, is that violent crime is out of control in the city of Berkeley. And if no meaningful action is taken, this ends only one way, with one of our kids losing their life to violence. Now, what we are asking is, there's a perception that our Berkeley Police Department needs help. They need more resources, whether that means more incentives to get additional officers or the ability to leverage more technology to help prevent crime from happening in the first place, things like license plate scanners, intersection cameras, and the like. I think that we want to see something done. Right now, there's a feeling that very little is changing. And whenever we bring this up, we're assured that violent crime today is actually very much on par with where it was before the pandemic. But I'm sorry, if you guys are reading the same headlines I'm reading, it doesn't feel correct. It feels like we have an out of control situation. And I'm asking that you empower the Berkeley Police Department with whatever resources it needs to get a handle on this crime spike that's taking place in the city of Berkeley. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, I do not see any additional members of the public who are attending virtually for the.
Excellent. Mr. Roman, do you want the opportunity to speak?
Okay.
So that brings us to agenda item number 5, which is the approval of the minutes from March 15, 2023. Please.
Page 9, number 8, where it talks about the chief report, it talks about non-sworn personnel is 44 purposes. It's dispatch personnel is 24 purposes, not non-sworn.
Let's speak of dispatch. Thank you. I just realized listening in, there was a correction to the minutes from number 8, chief of police report. And then it was the dispatch time. 24 hours. Is there any other motion to make?
No.
Right. Let's see. Waiting for that, we'll go ahead and simply vote. What is this, agenda item 6? Or did you maybe start?
Thank you, Chair Moore, members of the board. I want to start off with some training opportunities. I know later on we'll discuss the retreat, but I know from the retreat and before that, we've been having discussions about training opportunities. I do have a pending law for you. I need to add the hours from the retreat, but our policy analyst is an expert on pivot tables. He created some nice visualizations, so we'll be able to show you exactly how many of each category you have. So we'll get that to you. I know it sounds like a broken record, but we're gonna get that to you soon. I just want to make sure I got the hours from the retreat in there. I did circulate an email that there was an opportunity for an investigative forum that NACO started. They're launching this new program. One of the board members, Jason Wechter, is leading that effort. And they met last week. And it was a relatively good turnout. It was about 100 practitioners from across the nation. It was capped at 100, so it probably could have been more people in there, but I think it's a really good resource tool. Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about different tools that different practitioners are using. So there was a lot of sharing of resources. And it was an initial meeting, so we'll see how that develops, but it seems like it has a lot of potential. There's also, if you're not familiar, Canada has an equivalent of they call it escaping. And their conference is coming up May 29th to the 31st. They have both an in-person and a virtual conference. And for this year, some of the topics that they'll be discussing are cultural implications for the public complaint process and review decisions, trauma-informed investigative techniques, community policing and oversight, neurodiversity, and challenges for police oversight in Canada. I had the opportunity to go last year, and I thought it was a really good conference, a really nice group of practitioners, and we engaged in a lot of discussion. There were a lot of police officers present there as well, so they're actively engaged with their oversight community. But I'll send an email with the details if you're interested. They can give you the information and we can sign up yourself if you're interested in attending virtually or in person if anybody's interested. Last Monday, we had the opportunity to attend, and I mentioned it briefly at the retreat, but we had the opportunity, Mr. Murillo and I, to attend the decal class where we provided an overview of civilian oversight. We presented on the board's work, on the office's work, and we had a nice intimate group of students that were engaging with us and asking us questions about what our authority is and how to participate in the process. Do you have anything you want to add?
I'll just add that it's always a nice experience to be able to engage with different stakeholders, including students from the university and hearing their thoughts and perceptions. One of the important aspects of this being a good source of outreach is that a lot of the students are active across different groups around the community in and out of Berkeley. So just having the opportunity to provide them with additional resources was a great opportunity, and that we really enjoyed.
Since last meeting, I want to report also that we have received a semi-complaint or complaint in progress. In reviewing doing this project of reviewing minutes, and I know that that's something that was traditionally done by the director. I don't think I have done it much since I've got it, but we haven't received too many additional complaints as I arrived. But I do want to report that we have received, we're in the process of processing one additional complaint since the last meeting. And I think that's all of the immediate updates I have for you at this moment. I don't know if you have any questions or comments.
So I just want to make a comment. I tried to get on that Nico thing, but because it was capped at 100. So I don't know if there's any way for you to kind of reach out to them and say, 100 is probably not enough. Yeah, because I mean, I probably tried to get on within a minute. It started and I couldn't get on. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it was like immediate. It was couldn't get on.
Thank you for that feedback.
Sharon.
Please.
Just to follow up on what you're saying about the processing of a new complaint. So it sounds like we're finally caught up on the pre-existing complaint, or is that the case? I know we had been up against a bunch of deadlines, so are there any significant deadlines coming up, or are we?
I think it depends what you might caught up, but we do have in the closed session some updates about the pending cases, so I can give you more in depth in that. But for the most part, I think that we are at a better place than we were before.
Any more questions for the director in the office? Not, that's gonna take us to agenda item number 7. It's the chair report, and the board members, if you care to speak, you have floor. I will be brief. I'm going to actually brief the board on a discussion I had this morning with the chief. We met today and discussed opening new lines of communication, us working together on some of our upcoming challenges. We figured out what we're going to have to the captain's brought up the LPR situation. We're wanting to have a resolution. We discussed how we can work together from the very beginning of the processes. Those sometimes they are staggered, but it's more efficient and it's easier to work together. Both agreed that was what we were trying to do moving forward. Our conversation was beyond worthwhile. We had to really break down some of the questions that come on both sides. We feel like how we can be accountable for starting the process of because we neither of us going in. So we're gonna have to look this up. And I look forward to more discussions with the chief, working closely not only with the police, but the EPA. And that is something that we make sure that we do, and that was something that is positive as we move forward. And that's the only update I have. A few other board members would like to have the floor, please. Anything? Okay, that's it. Right.
Captain Durham, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'll start with staffing on the chief's report. This should be a fairly brief report overall, but there's been no significant staffing changes since the chief last reported 2 weeks ago, so I'm not going to go through those numbers now. We did host, and I mentioned it about a month ago when I was last here, that we did host our dispatcher open house this past Monday, and we were pleased with those who came. At that particular event, we saw people we had met at previous recruiting events. So that's very encouraging to us for the dispatch numbers. This Saturday, we have our police officer testing. So we hope to also see some familiar faces at that event, because truly when we're doing our best recruiting in terms of hiring, we're making connections and creating those bonds before the applications and the testing process takes place. So we're really hoping to leverage that recruitment and retention team that we started this year. So that's the staffing update. In terms of cases of interest in crime trends, and everyone can hear me fine, correct?
Yes.
Sound great.
Okay. Officers, you know, I dawned on me over the last month that we often talk about crime, but this last month, I've never seen so many calls that our officers went to and spent time on that were weather-related calls. And I don't think that's probably a surprise to anyone here or listening, but those could be traffic hazards, collisions, fallen trees, down power lines. So it's just, those are the other things that when we're in a staffing crunch, those are things we have to go to. They're connected to public safety and they keep us busy. So I just wanted to point that out, and just areas where we spend our time. Over the weekend, back to kind of traditional crime stuff that you associate a lot of our work with, we did recover a firearm with an extended magazine this weekend during a car stop. That vehicle was missing a plate or 2 plates, I'm not sure, but just to point that out, that vehicles without license plates and expired registration continue to commonly be or lead to other crimes. So that's a pretty common one for us. And while I'm on that topic, I do want to take just a moment. I looked at the notes from the last time I was here, and I want to clarify something that I either incorrectly stated or it was transcribed in error last month. I believe that was 2 PAB meetings ago. But I thought I was asked in that meeting about the investigative value of LPR if a vehicle had no no plates, and I acknowledge there wouldn't be a lead to follow up on if the vehicle had no plates. But when I looked at the transcribed notes, it said that it asked if the plates had been, the question was if the plates had been changed. And so I just want to clarify that if the plates had been changed on a vehicle and the LPR picked up that car, there would still be investigative value there, as long as the plate was already entered as associated with a crime. So it's a small clarification, but I did pick it up when reviewing the notes. So you're welcome to ask me any questions about that. In regards to policies or updates regarding policies, March 14th, as the board is aware, we reported on drones and fixed cameras to the Public Safety Policy Committee. We have received the additional feedback from the PAB regarding those policies, and we're currently digesting those suggestions and concerns. Currently, our plan is to get fixed cameras and drones, those two policies, in front of the full council sometime in May. And for follow-up items, the chief and I talked today. We acknowledge that we still have to deliver the second early warning system audit results to the DPA. She still needs a little time to review that, but she should get those, get that to the DPA within the next week. Continuing on the topic of early warning system, an update there is over the last 2 weeks, our inspection and audit sergeant has been going to all the team briefings to let the officers know that we will be including a random audit of BWC footage as part of the next quarterly audit. So that next quarterly audit will start next month, but we're letting all our officers know that we will be including a random review of body-worn camera footage. And the last update, which is probably stated if you caught the our annual crime report, but I believe we stated it there that the FIP updates that we've been working on, we now released a policy memorializing the updates that we've made progress on, and just so that it's always somewhere in a policy. The policy is 1107, as opposed to either an email or a captain's instruction or wherever else they were all held in the past. So that's all the updates I have.
Are you ready to take questions? We have a few. Well, that's what she's going ahead.
Captain Burke, is with us?
I'm here, I'm listening.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your report. At our last meeting, I had asked the chief if he would be receptive to the idea of the department having a liaison with our board, since she is so busy, to somebody that could be a contact person in the department. And I wondered if there'd been any, she seemed receptive to the idea, and I wondered if you knew if there had been any further developments in that regard, and if not, whether you please pass along that request again.
I have not had a conversation with her about that, and I can follow up with her tomorrow or later in this week, and she can always communicate to the DPA. But just out of my own curiosity, with that, since this is the first I'm hearing about, is that a liaison for, would that be just like the consistent in this meeting, or would that be for anytime calls, questions, emails? Is that the thought process there?
You know, we hadn't figured it out completely, but the idea is that there be somebody who's a contact person besides the chief for, you know, general questions. We didn't get down to the nitty-gritty of the process and what it'd be limited. It wouldn't just be for these meetings, though. It would be for the work in general. For example, I know I just like to do a ride along, and he couldn't be the one that, you know, I should be bugging about that. And so if there was somebody, a body that we could know to reach out to, so as to not interrupt her busy schedule, that would be great.
Okay, yes, I will have conversations with her about it this week.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Board member,
My voice is not good tonight. I hope you can hear me. Is this okay? I'm also
I can hear you. I might need Jose's help, but I can hear you.
If you'd like, I can move the mic just a little bit closer to you.
Well, if you can hear me, I'm fine, but whatever is fine with me.
Okay.
I just can't talk for that. Related to your report about, discovering a firearm after a stop based on a license plate absence, I wanted to follow up on that and ask you if you know, or if you have any kind of record keeping about what the most common way that officers stop when they stop for just a DMV violation, like a license plate or registration, without having any connection to an ongoing criminal investigation. What is the most common way that you discover things like firearms or contraband? Is there some questioning or something that is commonly leads to this?
Yeah, I wouldn't know what the most common way is, and I didn't actually read that report. We just get updates on, yeah, there's just so many ways. Sometimes it's something the officer sees. It's usually, I think plain view observations are the most common way when the officer walks up to the car, what he or she sees, and then it goes from there. But it's usually something on the doctrine of plain view. And I say usually, but that's what comes to my mind from my experience.
And is there any kind of record keeping about this pattern, if there is a possible pattern? I don't know if there is, other than reading police reports where you see how each individual case transpires.
No, there's
Records the most common way firearms are discovered or other contraband in non-criminal investigation detentions.
no, there's nothing to make that link like the question you just asked. We do keep the record of whether we recovered a firearm. I've seen that on the Transparency Hub. I believe it was also in our annual report that states it was recovered in this way, whether it was a search warrant or an officer's response to a call or a stop, but not in the way you just described. Like what was the step between there? Not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you. Captain Durban, thank you for your report. Can you hear me okay?
I can, thank you.
So you mentioned that the department was going to present to city council next month on the drones and surveillance camera policies, and that you had received feedback from us and that you were taking that into consideration. I'm wondering, is that within the department complete? Or is that still underway? Because we have those items on the agenda still tonight, and we may have further feedback.
I need a little help there. I heard almost everything except for the last sentence, and I think that was the crux of
The process of putting those reports on the drones and surveillance cameras that will be reported to council next month.
Yes.
And you're incorporating some feedback from us in the PA. I was wondering if your process internally was complete on those reports that will be going to council, because we actually are continuing to work on those issues.
So you asked if our work was complete on those.
Going to be receptive to further feedback.
So I looked at what came in the packet and read over that. I don't know how much the chief has had an opportunity at this point, and I haven't gotten completely through it, but I do intend to talk to the chief a little more about that. So at this point, I don't know either way if there's going to be any additional changes, but we do know that we have at least several more weeks before we have to submit it to the clerk to make it to council. So there is a window there.
Thank you. Captain Durbin, just to give you some background, that additional feedback actually came out of the public safety committee. So it wasn't like we're trying to add more information. There's some information that the public safety committee members from the city council asked to the board, but it wasn't something they had contemplated initially.
I see. Yeah, I understand.
Excellent. So I'm going to transition a little bit, Captain Norman, and are you prepared to discuss the March 7th drone usage incident? I have some questions. I just wanted to see if we could get a little clarification on the police department's position on a few things. Those are definite issues.
I'm sorry this is going like this because I'm trying my best to hear, but I know you're asking about the March 7th use of the drone. And if you have the question, go for it. I didn't hear if there was a question. I'm sorry.
Well, no, not yet. I can pose one though. I just wanted to know what qualifies as exigent circumstances? And in this particular situation, you know, if we can finally know why this checked all the boxes and we said, hey, this is something that we're gonna go ahead and use drones.
Okay, so and we've touched on this in the past. So exigency or exigent circumstances is difficult to define because it often falls under two things that have to be considered, like what is objectively reasonable and totality of the circumstances. And so I also have noticed when we've talked about exigent circumstances, there is kind of two thought processes. There's one, like just the common use of the term as you'll hear it used, just commonly used. It's usually just referring to something somebody would consider an emergency. But I've also noticed that, and if you ask most police officers, what does exigent circumstances mean to them? It's it's more related to the objectively reasonable criteria for related to warrants and why you can enter a location because of exigency. So it doesn't always have to be an emergency. And so I don't want to complicate this a lot, but I've just noticed when we talk about it, there's kind of two different ways that the conversation goes. And so like for instance, a fresh pursuit can be the exigent circumstances that leads you to go inside of a location that you normally would have needed a search warrant. But that doesn't always mean that everything was an emergency involved with that fresh pursuit. So with the drone usage, I think more often than not, we're talking about if we have something that's exigent circumstances related to the term more closely associated with it's objectively reasonable to believe that there's an emergency. All the totality of the circumstances involved with that would include, is there a risk to the public? Is there a risk to the suspect? Is there a risk to the community? So it's so difficult to define exigent circumstances in one sentence. And so I believe the most common use connected to drones that you'll see exigent circumstances connected to it would be similar to the use on March 7th, where we're following up on something and it leads us to a location and we want to use a drone to clear that area before we send officers or into that location. That's probably going to be the most common use. And so the exigency there is connected to what was the crime, was the crime involved? Now, these are the totality of the circumstances discussions. What was the crime? Was there a weapon used? Do we not know who's inside? what's happening at that moment? Are people communicating with us, or is there no communication at all? Am I helping answer the question? Because I know it's complicated.
And I hear you, and I didn't just know I was going to be dangerous. And what I'm asking for is there a balancing test? That must be, in order for controls to use. I'm looking for that balancing test. This is, we are, you mentioned, the citizen communities, TFCs.
Jose, if you're there, board member Moore is the only, is for some reason I can't hear board member Moore, and I could hear the rest of the board members, and I'm not sure.
I think that's just my voice. I mean, it's not voice.
Okay, one moment while we adjust the mic.
I believe so.
Yeah, I think we don't know what the March 7th incident is. Okay.
So I don't know what you did out here, but I can give you a quick synopsis of what I'm doing. Probably should first go to the every time.
I can hear you better. That's better.
Okay. So what I was asking is there a balancing test? A checklist. Drones will be deployed in the city of Berkeley if and when these criteria are met. What makes it an exigent circumstance situation where we're saying we're going to use drones in the city of Berkeley?
So Captain Derby, can you hear me?
I can.
So the question from the chair is there a balancing test that the department considers when they're deploying the drones within the city, or when they're requested to deploy the drones within the city?
And the question is there a balancing test? Is that what I heard is the first part?
Yeah, a checklist of exigent circumstance that meets exigent circumstance criteria.
I'm not getting the question. I'm sorry. Is there I heard almost everything the DPA said, except I didn't hear the very beginning.
There's a definition, I thought I read it again today, but there's a definition in the policy of exigent circumstances. So it is defined, keep flipping through it, but I think it's something about an immediate threat of danger to persons or significant property damage or something, because I was on that subcommittee, we worked with the department and we did discuss exigent circumstances and came up with that.
Right. And so, yeah, I thought he was asking in general because we're talking about the policies. But yeah, it was defined for the surveillance technology. Right. And so that's I can review that one where you're talking about the city managers. It starts with the city manager, that definition.
Well, go ahead.
Okay, I guess I'm not, first of all, I'm not familiar with the March 7th incident, so I'd love some clarification about that. And then secondly, I know there is a definition of exigent circumstances. So I guess I'm confused about the.
Well, what I'm asking is, if there were for drones, for the criteria for exigent circumstances to be met before drones can fly in the city of Berkeley.
So, Captain Durham, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so what the chair,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, what the chair is asking is if there is a checklist
Oh,
that
okay.
we completed before drones are deployed in the city of Berkeley.
is there a checklist that we go through before drones are deployed in the city of Berkeley?
Yes. For the exit.
Yeah.
To be exigent circumstances.
No, no, we don't work off a strict checklist. So no, it would be more of the totality of the circumstances. So for the surveillance technology ordinance usage, we are referring to the definition that exists there. And then that's a determination made, but there still is totality of the circumstances considerations that are made. It's not a strict checklist.
Okay, that was my only question, thank you.
I'm so sorry that it took us.
That's all right, we got it, we got it. All right, don't worry. Which one is the vice chair, the motion?
Yeah, so, actually, yeah, if you could repeat for me, you said it earlier, because I had some interest in the body worn camera policy.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier about auditing the body worn camera, can you just repeat that for me, so I can understand what that audit is gonna look like, and what the purpose of that audit would be?
The additional early warning system, the body worn camera footage, what you're asking specifically, what's that look like
You
in
mentioned
regards
earlier,
to early warning system?
right, yeah, you mentioned, okay, so. You
Yeah,
mentioned
sure.
body worn camera audits to that.
Right. Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at, so the same thing, the audit and inspection sergeant's going to use the random 5 officers. And in addition to all the other criteria he was looking at, he's going to look at 5 body worn camera footages from those officers' calls. And what we're not going to do is we're not going to look at calls that would have triggered a use of force, because those are already reviewed by the chain of command. So it kind of would be redundant. So if it's already triggering a use of force, then he's going to say, okay, that one doesn't count, but he's going to find 5 random body worn camera footages from those 5 officers every quarter.
Every quarter, okay. So that was sort of something that I was looking at. I do have a couple of questions regarding the policy. Because it seems really strict as far as access the footage, which is great. But I'm wondering how does the training division determine which body worn camera or what footage they will use for training? And how often are they actually using body worn camera for footage for training?
I think it's super frequent, but it can be used for training. And so it was typically something will happen and it will be a point of discussion. And we'll say, hey, that would be good for training. So it doesn't usually happen the other way where we say, let's go search body worn camera footage for training opportunities. It's more of the other way where, hey, that would be something that would be good to share for training purposes. And so we're already aware of the incident, a supervisor makes us aware, or we are already discussing it. So that's much more likely how it would be used.
Okay, and then for the early warning system that you're talking about, the footage, the officers randomly audit, the random audits of officers, will that be for every officer in the department that's on, patrol?
So it's going to be 5, that's something I actually have to follow up on. Now that you ask it, but I assume that he's using a randomizer, something, I'm not exactly sure how it works, but so it's just 5 random officers. And I believe that if he gets the same one he's already done in the last 1 or 2, he would move on and get another one. So yeah, in theory, if he's working that way over time, he would go through everybody. But I think I'd want to double check with him and get back, make sure I'm clear on that.
Okay, yeah, because I think if it's 5 officers, then you're talking about 20 officers a year.
20 a year, yeah, but I would hope in my mind that we're not, if we get the same person again, that we'd move on, but I do want to double check that.
Okay, yeah, I'd be interested to know whether or not all officers will be audited on that. If you could get back to me on that, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
And then I have another question regarding, when they can turn off their body on cameras during an active incident. The policy has a discussion of tactical or confidential information with other law enforcement personnel. Can you give me a situation where that would occur?
Yeah, if you're, let's say planning, something for, well, the confidential, I'll give you one of each. So, planning your strategy for, your tactics, would be one that would be, something that you would mute for and discuss that. The confidential would be if it's someone's, let's say medical, you're starting to discuss a medical condition or medical status of somebody, then you would mute for that.
So just for an example, just a quick question. So if I'm on patrol and I do a routine traffic stop and I turn my camera on, I'm in discussion with the person that I've stopped and my partner's there, and I have a discussion with my partner. Can I turn my camera off while I'm talking to my partner, or should that camera stay on?
In that scenario, I would think the camera would stay on.
Okay. Okay,
Again, it depends on what it is exactly that's being discussed, but with nothing more.
and then my other question was about supervisory reviews. So, according to the policy that the supervisors can review the camera footage, I guess while they're approving the reports, is that the daily reports that are written by the patrol officers? And if so, how often are those cameras reviewed at that time, or do you know?
I'm not really sure. I'd probably defer that question to Lieutenant Reese, more in touch with the daily work. But I think it would probably be not too frequently. There'd have to be something that the sergeants would be interested in or seeing how it played out. But I don't think they're coming back and watching body worn camera footage. There's just not the time, and it's not a great use of our sergeants' time either, unless they have something else they're thinking about. We expect them, as I said in the last meeting I was here, to be in the field for a good percentage of their shift. Actually, supervising calls at the moment is a much better use of our sergeant's time.
Okay, and then just another question you may or may not have the answer to, but can you tell me on average how many reports patrol officers write within their duties time?
How many reports during a shift?
Yeah, during their assigned shift, what is the average number of reports written by patrol officers?
Oh, that would be tough for me to answer, because it would depend on the shift. Like a graveyard officer, and you're also, when you say writing a report, it could be just a computer report, a very short, brief sentence or two, but it could be a actual written report. Some of the reports are non-criminal, some of them are criminal, but it also varies on the shift. The day shift's going to write more reports typically than the graveyard shift, and the swing shift's probably going to write reports somewhere in between those two. So I wouldn't have a good guess.
Okay, I figured it might be a little stretch, but I was just curious to know. And then my last question, just on supervision, is so I know the supervisors are in the field, but do you know, or can you tell me how often the sergeants are on scene with their staff?
Well, the shifts are going to depend on that sometimes. Sometimes with our staffing, sergeants are picking up calls right now. That's not ideal, but as our staffing goes down, sometimes sergeants are just responding to calls. In a perfect scenario, our sergeants are supervising calls as much as they possibly can. So, you know, when I was a watch commander or a lieutenant, and I would talk with the sergeants about my expectations, I said I wanted you in the field on calls more than half of the time. And so I was always hoping for a 60-70% of the time in the field, going to calls as much as they could. So that's going to vary on the shift. It's going to vary on the expectations. Also, if they have any administrative work that's assigned to them. Some of our sergeants also have to do the staffing. One of our sergeants also deals with our fleet. So it's very difficult to answer that based on thinking of what the different assignments they're in. And as I mentioned earlier, the shift matters as well. So the graveyard sergeants are going to, there's less frequency of calls, but they are oftentimes frequently some of the most significant calls. So those sergeants are going to get to be on the scene at more calls, the graveyard sergeants.
Okay, all right, that's all I have. So, Captain Nerman, I have a question, related to the body worn camera video when you said they're able to turn them off. And you mentioned that if there's a discussion of tactical, decisions that are being made. So my question is, why would there be a need to turn it off if that body worn camera video is confidential anyway? Why would there be a need to turn it off when there's a discussion about the tactics here?
They're strategizing. They're not talking about anything related to the call, but yeah, it wouldn't be frequent. It would be fairly infrequent. I'm not sure how much it's occurring right now, but yeah, it would really depend, and I can't think of the exact scenarios or what exactly would be said or discussed, but I know how the policy is phrased.
It just seems interesting. I mean, the video is confidential anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't rise to the level of being able to turn it off, because no one is privy to it. And if there is a point where it is released publicly, you can always redact that. So that's why I was just curious.
I know, it's a good question.
So I want to follow up on this, turning off the body worn camera. I didn't think we were going to discuss that tonight because we're talking about forming a subcommittee on this policy related to body worn cameras. So I have in front of me some work that was done by our office, police accountability, and in front of me I have the 4 subsections related to when it's okay to turn off the body worn camera. And there is reference in section 8 to what you're talking about, tactical or confidential information. But in section D, it says, in the member's judgment, a recording would interfere with his or her ability to conduct an investigation. That leaves me with some concern that it's so open to individual discretion that there is no standard or even presumption against turning it off when the apparent national standard or accepted policies for cameras among police chiefs is, once a body worn camera is activated, the entire incident or encounter should be recorded without interruption. I'm wondering if somebody from the department could participate with us on this subcommittee to explore the possibility of tightening up some of these situations so that there isn't so much open-ended discretion on the part of an individual who may have a judgment that doesn't really fit with the overall intent of body-worn cameras.
I understand, and I will discuss that with the chief. And that was, I did note that was one of the items brought up in the agenda packet.
Okay, and if you could also just somebody from your department who's prepared to talk to us so that we can put our heads together, hearing from you what your concerns are, your department that is, and hearing from us what our concerns are, to come up with something mutually acceptable or appropriate would be ideal.
And we have done that in the past, and it's efficient and very productive if we can have a representative from the department.
When does the, do you have an anticipated start date for the subcommittee work for on BWC?
I was actually gonna just make a motion that we, form the committee this evening and members of the committee. So
That's what I was saying.
yeah, so we haven't met or started yet, but we will definitely, let you know.
Okay, I'll bring this to the chief.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a clarification. It is very rare that we physically turn it off. I think what you're referring to is muting it. So if there are situations that the captain talked about where we mute it, but it's very rare that we actually turn it off and stop recording it in entirety. So when you say turn it off, I don't know if you're meaning turn it off, or if you're just talking about muting it.
I think you're talking about.
And I was referring to meetings, so that does make a difference. So what about muting though? I don't know that
See, even that change would be helpful, because the policy doesn't clarify that. So it's possible it's the officer who couldn't know that.
But again, we'll get to that.
So, yeah, I don't want to motion on the floor that we have a subcommittee to provide one camera. And of course, I will volunteer for that committee and do somebody else.
Let's get a vote.
Oh, that's in the vote.
To vote, create a subcommittee.
Okay.
So let me see.
Okay, so I have a motion from Vice Chair Harris. Was there a second? Okay. Okay. With that being said, I'll start with the roll call vote. Board Member Calavita.
Yes.
Board Member Harris.
Yes.
Board Member Lethwich.
Yeah.
Board Member Levine.
Yes.
Chair Moore.
Yes.
And Board Member Owens.
We voted to form a subcommittee.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my understanding, one day, what you're going to is appointing members.
We had to do that.
So we do have a subcommittee only for under. Should we have it?
I volunteer.
So is the motion being withdrawn, just to be clear?
Yes, I would offer the motion. I wasn't clear that we actually formed the committee at the meeting. Yes.
Okay, so the motion. Okay. And I heard 2 volunteers. Okay. So there's 3. Okay, and that would be Vice Chair Harris, Board Member Lethwich, and Board Member Levine.
Is there anything else that you would like to discuss with the chief or the chief's representative, Dr. Doherty, to the police? Now is the time, we're gonna move forward. Right, excellent. Which brings us to, thank you all for your time and attention and effort. I appreciate it. And that takes us to agenda item number 9, to subcommittee reports. And we're going to start with the downtown task force subcommittee.
Once again, you new information, we're still gathering information, the staff is working on providing sufficient information.
Thank you. And that takes us to regulations.
We've been working hard, we've, almost finished, as I say at each meeting, but, I believe our final meeting will be this Friday. And subsequently, we will bring it to the full board and then council.
Wonderful, great update. And that would take us to fair and impartial regulation, and fair and impartial subcommittee, and that's also chair of the.
Well, what we need is the appointment of an additional board member to this committee. We've not had a meeting in a while. It's very important that we get moving on this, and I would like to move forward, more quickly, but we need another member. Board member Ramsey was on it, and of course he left us. So it is Chair Moore and me. We really need a third member. We have two public members. We need three board members. Any volunteers? This is one reason we need nine board members. Yeah, that's about it. Yes, I'm sorry. Here.
I just got signed up for the Bible. I would.
So.
Well, just off with conflict of interest. Subcommittee, I'd be asking that we function.
No.
But I don't think I'm the best person you want to.
Can I appeal to anyone else?
Everybody, chair is.
All right, so talking to three board members on this subcommittee, and you will be hearing from us to schedule.
Which takes us to agenda item number 10, that's old business. We're going to report on the status items from the request from the PAB to the LDPN, CAL, and the DPD.
Okay, I know it's been long awaited, and I realize that it actually it's on the agenda, but the report itself that we have compiled, it didn't make it on the agenda. I apologize for that, but we were able, for the CAO, the city attorney's office request, we looked at the period from January 2022 to December 2022. We were able to identify 24 or 23 separate requests for about 2 months. Most of them have been completed in one way or other, and I'll follow up in writing with this. But there were a few that were still unknown as to their status, or it was not, the information that may have been provided was not readily available. So just giving you some examples of that. There was the request in the January 1st, 2022 meeting, a request for a written memorandum regarding the conflict of interest issue, the issue of adverse interest versus conflicting interest regarding clarification on 125.15a. And for that one, the status of that, we found that there initially there was believed that there was a written memo, but that was never issued. There was verbal guidance that was provided to former Director Lee. We're trying to identify if that was ever memorialized within our records. It wasn't readily available. So that we put that as an unknown status. For another one, request was on June 8th, 2022. Recommendation that members of the PAB, DPD, and city attorney need to discuss discrepancies in interpreting the requirements of the charter with the goal of streamlining the process forward for future reviews. It's unknown from what we have seen if that ever occurred in one way or another. There was a request on July 13, 2022. Chair Chang at the time asked the DCA if board members forward messages to each other adding comments with that value of product, and how many people can, be that message change. So, that is unknown, and this is the sort of examples of the items that are still, not readily available, and we'll be following up. And similarly, we did the same process with, BPD request. And we would have to, again, I'll follow up in writing, with the specifics about that. And I apologize that I agendized it and didn't submit it to you or include it in the agenda itself.
Good.
I think so. I'm waiting for any questions or comments.
Does anyone have any questions? To the record?
I have a question. We said some of those requests were, for documents were completed. And I'm wondering, were they completed in a timely manner within the 15 days? Or most within 30 days? With explanation. So if you could include that in your memo to us, that would be helpful. Because on some future agenda, I'd like to re-agenda some possibility of a letter to council regarding these matters.
Thank you for that guidance, and we'll provide that information.
Anyone else? All right, that takes us to agenda item number 11, that's new business. And I'll start this off by discussing the PAB retreat. I wanted to say thank you first and foremost for everyone's attendance and engagement. I was a lot to ask for the Saturday. I get it, but I feel like while exercise, each other, working together, and figuring out what our next moves are this board and how we want to working going forward. So that being said, I look forward to us developing more programs like that, especially as we welcome hopefully 3 new board members very soon. You know, see that I'm getting this meeting and it's still need council to move swiftly because we are really wild to the amount of work that is being honest with us and in the director's office. And so, yeah, that's what I wanted to share about the tree life. I want to thank everyone for putting in the work behind the scenes that it happened. Thank you very much. The director was saying that it's not the shit down, and it was a success. I agree, promise. We're pretty fast. So that being said, that's some of the only works I have right now. That brings us to agenda item B, discussion and action regarding supplemental information report, City Council Public Safety Policy Committee regarding surveillance technology. It's a mouthful, but so with unmanned aerial systems. We're going to be
Yeah, I don't mind, but I don't have anything really new to say. We met officially and we talked as a group here, including this evening. So I don't think we have anything concrete other than the letter that was originally sent with our concerns about civil rights, etc. That doesn't mean I think that there isn't anything further to be done. I think there is.
I think I'll just provide some.
We're always sharing part of this letter that was written on May, which I didn't. Pardon me? Yeah.
How about we have policy analyst Morello kind of go over what the information
I provided. I appreciate it, because I didn't have just to break this down.
Yeah, so this was done as a follow-up to the March 20th Public Safety Policy Committee. We were present there and we were listening to the discussion that was done by the council members, part of that committee. And they had a few questions in terms of our recommendations. Generally, they did receive a lot of the propositions that we had initially placed in terms of the UIS systems. Sergeant Du was pretty receptive to the idea of a public-facing portal to record any deployments of drones that would be more readily accessible instead of a yearly report, which was one of the recommendations we had suggested in that original letter. The documents that we present you today are recommendations that we have to questions that were brought up to each distinct technology. We, as the office, did a bit of research to provide to you today. These recommendations are really just to help guide the decision if there was any additional concerns. In terms of the UIS policy, the committee had asked us to elaborate further on what the board had considered to be the additional threats to civil rights and liberties that may be arised by the proposed policies. Again, we provide a bit of an outline as to what that thought process was on behalf of our office for your consideration. The second question within this line of the technology was that whether we had any recommended resources or model policies that we could suggest and guide them to. In terms of this aspect of it, we really guided our analysis towards providing some of the data and some of the research that other jurisdictions have done, as well as the general best practices that were provided by the COPS organization, just in terms of the way that they could implement these new technologies. In the case of drones, they are relatively new to the field of law enforcement. And I say relatively because there were changes to the FFA policies in 2016 that really allowed for further usage apart from just simply, they call it a hobby enthusiast. So this is when we start to get more into the more advanced drone technology. That's when a lot of agencies started developing these policies. So we really take a stance here saying that there isn't exactly a model policy just yet. Data takes a long time to collect and a lot of different avenues exist in terms of how they can be used. So while that data is being collected, we just, again, in our stance and our recommendation to the PAB is to really, to the PAB, is to direct these research materials to the council so that they may consider it in the final implementation of this technology. And I'll stop there for questions about the UIS.
Would anyone like to add anything? Any questions, concerns?
I do speak really fast, so.
I think you got it all in there.
Well, let me just say, I apologize for not having read this entirely since in anticipation of this discussion. So they are coming here. However, you know, just like in the policies that are promoted by Mexico, which are driven by the minimal requirements of constitutional decisions, which of course change over time, and the Fourth Amendment interpretations about all these questions has become much less concerned about civil liberties and weighing more heavily in the direction of, you know, use as opposed to curbing use. The lack of data and the newness of the equipment poses a conundrum or a difficulty for us as an oversight body. Because on the one hand, we want to be mindful of what the community needs for its own privacy and protection. We had speakers on this issue at the last meeting, the one before that, I can't remember. People who pointed out, you know, information gathered. Of course, this is more on the fixed camera issue, but the same questions arise with the drone policy. And the meaning of exigency, which is a standard that's pretty court has established, over in many cases where they define what this means. But I think we have to be careful not to feel bad about the minimum. We want to make sure that Berkeley lives up to its higher standards, and the dilemma that we identified in our meeting, which I think makes it real difficult. Maybe I should have asked Captain Durbin this, but if we're not the ones, we, the Berkeley Police Department, if our department isn't training officers, and it isn't our department that the officers using this, how can we as a community be confident that the goals we set in our policies are in effect? Since from what I understand, the policies are clear that Berkeley police aren't trained on use because we don't have them. And we have no control over what other departments are doing or training their officers to do. So the real question I think we came up with is, how do you make policies for drones when you don't use them, you only borrow them essentially, or you ask for them, but you don't have control over who and how they're used. So that's the dilemma I see with our tasks and with the further guidance from our board here in the office, which I appreciate you put a lot of work into. That's something I think we have to come up with. Or I really want to hear from the chief on that. But I could have asked Captain Durbin, but I wasn't really thinking in starting a conversation on this subject. So maybe I spoke too long. That's my concern here.
Would anybody else like that, anything? Okay, so I'm gonna keep the conversation moving, brings the videos for one cameras.
Yeah. But so the public safety committee, had our report that we talked about at our last meeting on, the use policies for fixed cameras, policy 351 and 1304. And if you remember, the main point that we made in our analysis of those policies was that the policies were much more expansive in terms of their possible use than the original city council budget referral, in which they stipulated that they would be used for criminal investigations solely. And so we made that point, and they heard that point presumably. I was not at the meeting, but Analyst Murillo was. But in turn, they wanted us to respond to three main questions. The first one was, what is the PAB's stance on the use of these cameras for police oversight, fighting the Tyree Nichols killing in Memphis, and the fact that one of a fixed camera captured the killing, and would it perhaps be useful in Berkeley as a police oversight tool? And it was brought to my attention in Maria's research that Memphis has 2,100 of these surveillance cameras, and that the capturing of that killing was possible because there was close monitoring and the operator was able to adjust the angle so that it captured that particular incident. Otherwise, the angle of the camera
wouldn't call it. So, and Memphis spends over $10 million in purchasing and installing these cameras and much more to do the real-time monitoring. There is not an extensive research out there, apparently, on the use of these cameras for police oversight. So, you know, we can make the point that there's not systematic research on this, however, in this case, it was fairly coincidental, not coincidental, but it was adjusted by the operator in a way that requires real-time monitoring. Second question they asked us was, what is the PAB stance on the use of these cameras in traffic investigations? There's little information to determine how effective they would be in investigating traffic collisions. There may be research, however, but we have not been able to run it up. The third question they asked was, how effective is fixed camera surveillance in deterring and reducing crime? And there is significant literature, and we've uncovered 5 major studies on this question, 3 of which are from the United States. And these 3 studies have different goals and different methodologies. In general, I think you could say that the impact on reducing crime is extremely modest and dependent on wide coverage and close real-time monitoring. And Analyst Maria has written much more detail about that, and I have written a little memo here that I can share with the office when they send this forward to the Public Safety Committee, in which I summarize those 3 studies, all of which use different methodology. One of them looks at auto theft in particular, the other one is general. So it's hard to summarize, but it looks like the effects are modest and depend on vast coverage and real-time monitoring. Now we've been asked for our position on these matters, and I suggest that we reiterate the main point that the use policies as written are inconsistent with what the City Council had approved of. And then we can also cite the literature as well in terms of their effectiveness in various realms. So that's all I have.
Would anybody like to ask any questions on this topic? One right down here. Thank you. As for this, board member, very hard. So
You're right. Seeing that. Sorry, just before we continue, we do want to note that the council committee is going to meet again, or has the plans to meet again in early April. So we had brought these items more as recommendations to the board to consider before we actually provide these, or rather if the board wanted to make changes before they get sent over to the council, just acknowledging that because they were asking for the board's position on it, we didn't necessarily want to overspeak and say that this was your research in your memo without having an approval or hearing back on any feedback you may have that you may want to incorporate. So we were looking for an action on this item.
So I'll make a motion that we include the information that policy analyst Maria put together, with adding the additional comment that the policy, our concern was related to the policy's original intent.
Okay.
When does this need to be finalized?
So we don't have an exact date for the special meeting, but I would like to finalize it within this week if possible. If not in the first initial weeks, I don't imagine that the meeting will be next week, but again, because it is a special meeting and the notice requirement is only 24 hours, the sooner the better is that I'll provide, but ideally within this week, and it's one of our priorities at the moment.
If you confer on Friday,
Yes,
I assume by this week, you mean the next 2 days.
yes. Ideally, yes.
That's really everything. Are we looking at a specific document that we're authorizing to be sent along, or something's going to be drafted? I'm not okay about the process.
So the way that we imagine this process, again, if the board accepted what our recommendations, we would restructure this to be on behalf of the board.
What page are you looking at again? In the material? 76.
Well, it starts at 7 for the surveillance. And then- Yeah, I thought you were making an action on both of them. Oh. Well, they're both came through the public safety committee, so. Okay.
You know, the other thing is, it's not clear what exactly the statement we're making is. If this is sort of a work in progress research document, which is very helpful, I'm very impressed and appreciate the work you're doing. But I think I would need to digest this a little bit more thoroughly and then speak to my colleagues here on the board before endorsing a specific communique on our behalf. That makes me a little, I think it's premature.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not totally comfortable saying. I'm not sure specifically what we're saying, and so I'm not comfortable. Otherwise, I would have felt better if there was specific draft statement. The rest of these things.
And I know that what we're doing is answering the question that the committee asked us. Right, so what we're doing is just following up with why, they want to know why we answered the way they were. We provided some background information to relate to them. But unlike this, you know, this one community in office is if we can do a 24-hour review and then get back to you guys, and that's what we're then I think it would benefit you. With our notes, is that the way that we can?
Well, I can't do that. I mean, I actually have studied this quite a bit and the research that was done, the studies. But I can't do this tomorrow. I have something else on the plate. And so I can't do it. I could talk on Friday, but still I understand what board members are saying, and I'm wondering when is the drop dead date on this?
Well, it's a special meeting, right?
Yeah, so like, Ms. Maria said, there's no, actual date given to us. I just want to explain the process. I think one of the things that we're gonna improve on this, we weren't notified until the day of that this subcommittee, and they asked us, can we attend? I was unavailable to attend, Mr. Murillo had to change his calendar, around to attend virtually. But I think now we're gonna keep this on the radar, and the process that I would like is, we know that we submitted a policy to them, and that they're potentially gonna be looking at it, so have a board member there to represent, you know, whoever the chair of that subcommittee is, so we're not caught in this position, because we weren't at a position where we could respond on behalf of the board. The best we could do is get the information that was asked, provide some preliminary research to you for you to consider. You do have the option of not answering, and they'll make their decision, you know, based on what they have. I just want to, you know, I don't want you guys to feel pressured, but I want to provide more context to have this while we're here.
Do you have some idea of when they plan to act on this? Not that we were given a deadline, but if there is some, it has to be some reasonable expectation.
Well, we can reach out again to the subcommittee members and find out if they have a specific deadline for when they will consider any information.
Yeah, because I think as a board, we're required to give input here on these policies, and so we should mindfully, you know, digest this and come up with a recommendation. And not, this gives them too much this is past the story, just to give them all the research.
Because we had discussed before, the main concept was that the use policy wasn't consistent with what the city council had directed. And we all agreed about that, but as far as me saying tonight, do I think that these cameras are effective in preventing or solving traffic related crimes? I'm not prepared to say that one way or the other, even, and I did read this stuff quickly, but I wasn't thinking I need to completely digest it and know what the answer is, and I feel like it's a bit much to ask us as a group tonight to answer that question. Do we think, it's effective?
Yeah, that's a fair position, and we can find out again, if there's any specific time frame that they're looking at, we'll get back to you, but, yeah, so if we communicated that we're trying to make a decision, we were just trying to express that we really don't know, so we wanted to put you in a position that if you want to weigh in, you'll have the opportunity, just because we're in the unknown, but we'll go ahead and circle back.
And the unknown is, let me just really inject this. You don't know what the special meetings are called. You want to have our information in before we do that.
And correct, and there is some council break right now. So it's unclear to me whether the subcommittee is gonna meet during this council break, but I know that and I believe the second week of April, they'll be back in session.
Or maybe we could say that the board has not had an opportunity to thoroughly analyze this and vote on it. However, board members have done some research, preliminary research. Shows this, if we feel compelled to say something, but to say that the full board has not had an opportunity to, do a deep dive on this.
And we'd like to give our.
Okay.
Right.
So-
So I would not to send the message that we haven't had a chance, and therefore you go ahead. No, I really want to have input on this. Right. Listen, what is the PAB stance on X, Y, and Z?
And they're going to be broadening I don't know what they're going to do. I think the idea that the city council plan have changed policy, so we better hurry up and weigh in.
Yes, I think that's,
They're going to change the policy.
all the cities.
Consider that part. But if they weren't considering, they wouldn't ask the question. So in my mind, they're considering expanding it. Yeah, and so they're asking what's our position on if they were to expand.
Yeah, and we
So-
want to get our, and we want to give our view, because looking at the research, there does not seem to make an understatement, conclusive evidence that this has, especially with 10 cameras at 10 intersections that aren't being monitored 24/7. There's no evidence that it's effective. And so I understand the person who made public comment, there's great concern about public safety, and I agree with that. But we don't want to just do anything to do it. We want to do something that's effective and not be misleading in terms of what it's going to accomplish.
Well, perhaps a recommendation would be that this is a very serious issue, and that we would ask that the city council take the time to thoroughly analyze it and get community input. So I think there's going to be a lot of input on this. I guess I'm just not ready tonight.
That's what we're at. So why don't we go ahead and on the issue for next week, we're not prepared to vote here.
But, this is sitting at the council subcommittee level, and this is where the question is coming from. If we miss that meeting, the special meeting that they're having, there is still potential, I would assume, that we can put together something that goes in front of the full council. At the same time, the subcommittee goes forward, with whatever they're gonna go forward with. Is that a possibility?
Well, we could- There are some deadlines associated with that, but considering these time constraints, we could look into that. And you also, have the opportunity to go to other comment sections where they're actually agendized. So we're gonna be monitoring whenever the council, as a whole is putting this on their agenda.
I would strongly urge us to be prepared to head into it at the level of the committee. It's my experience that in front of council, it's too late.
That's why they created the subcommittee. They wanted to be answered there.
Yeah.
But I think that's why staff provided us the information that they did, and it's unfortunate that people didn't read the agenda, because the staff provided some information with suggested responses to this.
Well, I get it, but there was no proposed response that we were voting. It was just,
Yeah, there is, like, for example, you were talking about, the studies related to the effect of that. The staff said in their proposal that the studies don't indicate that there is an effectiveness. The staff also put in this proposal in their response that, it was something with, the drones or something, that the staff made an attempt to respond to these questions that allowed us to kind of read it and say, do we agree with this? Or do we think there needs to be more? And I think that's what staff was asking as far as, hey, we made an attempt to respond to these questions. We want you to review if you want to make changes or you don't agree or you want to add something to it. Now would be the time. But I think the assumption was that we read this and saw, what they were recommending that the response would be. So and the staff is saying that, if we want to get this in front of the subcommittee may meet before we meet as a full board again. So that's what they were trying to put this in front of us, so we can be kind of prepared to have this discussion right now as to whether or not we thought that the subcommittee in their package was valid or not, and if we had suggested changes. Now, people are saying they didn't get a chance to read it, I understand that, but staff is saying that may potentially not allow us to put this information, our opinion in front of the subcommittee. So that's all I'm saying.
I just have to say that staff has provided us in excellent manner as usual, the research on the pros and cons of these cameras in terms of their effectiveness, in terms of the oversight, in terms of traffic collisions and so forth. What they haven't done, because understandably it's not their job, to say what the PAB, the committee explicitly said to us, what is your stance on this? Okay, so it's one thing to put the research together and have it in front of you, but it doesn't come to the conclusion, therefore our stance is,
right.
And
the other thing is, I like to look at the test, the original research that's being synthesized, some of which is very critical in terms of advocating a certain position. Some of these cases that are cited, and frankly, even if I had read every word of it, I wouldn't have had time to do the position. To discuss it out with his hours.
What I like to do is we want to have this conversation going longer. Let's not read this anymore right now. We need to find a resolution and solution in the situation. Remind me to be able to take this vote now because there was a motion on the floor. It didn't get a second. I don't think we need to table it. I want to go ahead and see if there is a second. If one of more moments, motion.
My motion is to accept the responses that the staff have drafted for our approval. Is to accept those responses with the caveat of adding that our concern was related to whether or not the expansion of the use of these buildings.
Well, never tell me, you're just really concerned that this is important for us to do.
Well, it would be important for us to do before that. I'm from a motion, I'm concerned with motion, I just wanted to, can I?
From one, well,
It's a friendly amendment. I guess it is. And maybe a question to Mr. Marino. I looked a little, but I didn't have enough time to look absolutely thoroughly on the topic of the use of these fixed cameras and racial disparities. Because there isn't anything in the research report that you've done here. But I have seen reports by the ACLU and other entities about things like facial recognition. I know it's banned in Berkeley, but technology such as facial recognition, drones, fixed cameras, and so forth that have impacts on racial disparity. And that is, I would, I don't know how to do this and also have a vote tonight, but I would like to do some additional research on that topic because I think it could be useful at the Committee on Public Safety. To have that. So that's a friendly amendment that if should, if there, you know, if.
yeah, so it's a little part of the main instruction, whether back here, whether you want lines from above the healthcare, we think there's some more research.
Yes, and that I can confirm what I do with Mr. Murillo. But I simultaneously understand the concerns of the board members that they want to.
Maybe we could do some kind of compromise where, you know, we could write something saying that our original concern was over the expansion of the use of these cameras, you know, beyond what the city council had authorized. You know, we conveyed that, you asked us these questions, staff did research, and this was the preliminary research. You know, we think these are really crucial, that we require much more research without, I guess I'm just hesitant to have like a yes or no, we think these are bad, we think these are good. But I think the research is important, and so I'm just wondering if there's some way to respond, so we don't lose an important opportunity without, you know, leaving just a little, just softening it a bit, I don't know.
Go ahead.
What about sending something to the subcommittee on public safety, saying that we have now received initial research on the questions they have asked and are discussing when we will be able to provide, discussing our recommendations to you with regard to the use of these this surveillance equipment, which we will do promptly and request that you wait until you receive that recommendation with any guidance on timelines that we are currently unaware of. Something to that effect that we want very much to communicate to answer this and give our position. We have preliminary research and we are going to emphasize to come up with recommendations. Because this, it would be hard if I were in Mr. Morio's position to then have to come up with a recommendation that he confidently all agree on. So that's essentially, I'm trying to find the best words which I got.
Anyway, I saw you guys are talking. Maybe we some of us works with the office in Jose to drive that lane. So that's what we are as a board. Or we're still gathering information. So maybe. But all the things that something behind that there's no political action happening. And we're in different places. And we can call a vote, the night it was like. Okay.
Motion.
Oh, you're gonna make a motion?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Staff here to the staff based on the request by the subcommittee to draft a letter from the board saying we are in the process of synthesizing research that has been provided to us and will, as promptly as possible, give you our recommendations regarding use of surveillance policies and their use of this equipment. And then, and at the same time, maybe a sentence about timelines and that's it. So if you say you want to say something, we've got preliminary research and we will get back to that we as a group can decide. I mean, we have a subcommittee, so I don't see it's two different subcommittees, so it's a little unclear how we would actually do the nuts and bolts of putting up the policy recommendations together.
I'm the only member of my subcommittee.
Oh,
What was the expectation from the subcommittee? The expectation from the subcommittee is that we will respond in time for the next special meeting? Or is there a potential for us to respond after the next special meeting?
yeah. Good question.
It was my understanding that they wanted a response before they take it to council, but you correct me if I'm.
Just adding to that, apart from they want our response before we take it to council, they actually requested that the director and then a member from the board actually be present at their next meeting to answer questions on this.
What did they say when that would be? It's hard to just.
But say also that the most substantive reduction that they have is the fact that it's kind of surveillance and deterring and reducing crime. We actually answered that question in our original recording.
So
It's like
it's, and I apologize, I probably should have clarified a little bit more of this question. This question was posed during the committee, but it wasn't necessarily answered in length. It was just referenced back to the article that we had cited. But it didn't really dive deep into it, and it actually got misquoted in the sense that it said that we were essentially saying that the crimes would simply move crime somewhere else, which was not the true essence of the report. So we felt that it's the responsibility to, in terms of the board and our body, to provide enough information to one, clarify that point, and to provide additional resources to expand on that, show the different effects that these surveillance cameras have had, as well as the different models that exist.
Okay. All right, director, and then one more time, then Lance,
I'm just reminded there's a motion on the floor, I was going to second it, but that seems like a good compromise, that means you provided a response to the subcommittee, letting them know that you're still interested. So if you want to consider that, it hasn't received a second, but, yeah.
remember what that.
The last motion that I recorded was for board member would be, she wanted to direct the staff to inform the subcommittee that they have received the preliminary report from staff and that the board as a whole is in the process of drafting a response, and the board is seeking guidance on the timeline when they need the report to the public safety subcommittee.
If we go like it's sooner than later, what will be our next week?
You could potentially explore doing a special meeting just for this particular item.
So then, it sounds like it's both. Okay. Do we have a second? Oh, go ahead. I hope we'll get one.
It's fun. Just to add in the letter that, you know, we will be meeting as a full board on August 11th, and we will discuss April 11th. And we will discuss it further at that time, so if they can meet after that, we will like, you know, yeah, just coordinated.
We have super emotion.
Yeah, and they work.
Okay, that's really relevant something.
Yes.
So the one will be accepts the friendly amendment, that was ready for the vote.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and start the vote. Board Member Calavita,
Yes. Yes.
Vice Chair Harris,
Yes.
Board Member Lethwich,
Yes.
Board Member Levine,
Yes.
Chair Moore,
Yes,
and Board Member Owens.
Yes.
The motion carries.
all right.
Okay, so this means that at our next meeting, everybody will have read all of the research. And
Yeah.
So that brings me to 11C, creation of former board members to subcommittee exploring issues and solutions regarding conflicts of conflicts of interest with legal counsel. Board member Michael, should we take the floor?
Yes, but just, regarding the last topic. If there could be something, proposed.
Board member Michael, should we take the floor?
I did read everything, but I wasn't, there was nothing that I expected to vote on, so if there were a draft.
Yeah.
Letter from us to the city council, that would expedite. Okay. All right, so on this last topic, I don't think we need a lengthy discussion, this issue has come up regularly during the last 18 months. And I think, based on our prior discussions, it's clear that under some circumstances, conflict of interest arises when the city attorney's office represents or serves as our attorney while simultaneously serving as the attorney for the police department and the city as a whole. I think it's been a source of great frustration for the board. We've been talking about it and not getting anywhere. So I think it's important that we form a subcommittee to just focus on this issue and try to figure out what our next steps should be. And I thank Director Aguilar for the memo that he provided. That had some valuable information. So I would move that we create a subcommittee to focus on the conflict of interest issue and that we populate that subcommittee with members tonight.
I second it. Can I jump in? I agree that this is a really important topic. But with 6 members on our full board, at some point we have to try to prioritize what's kind of at the top of the list. And not to say that this is at the bottom, but we're already kind of stretching ourselves really thin. And maybe this is something that once we get the 3 additional board members, we kind of tackle. And like I said, I agree that this is really important, but I mean, there's only so many of us. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna throw that out there.
No, that's true. And in that regard, do we have any sense when we might be getting our additional board member?
I received some information yet that I don't know that, has been vetted yet, but there seems to be some movement. It seems like at least one potential appointee is right around the corner. Okay, I'm trying to check with the clerk, to find out what the status is.
Well, I for one would volunteer for this.
So maybe we go ahead and vote on it and we'll get enough.
Okay, so I do have the motion and the second, so I will proceed to the roll call vote. to establish a subcommittee on the conflict of interest issue. I will start with Board Member Calvita,
Yes.
Vice Chair Harris,
Yes.
Board Member Luckich,
Yes.
Board Member Levine,
Yes.
Chair Moore,
Yes.
and Board Member Owens.
I don't think. I'm gonna say no.
Okay, so with 5 yeses and 1 no, the motion passes. Okay,
So then are there any other board members that would like to volunteer to serve on this subcommittee? Great, yeah. There's 3 of us. That's great.
and so that's Board Member Luckich, Board Member Levine, and Chair Moore. Okay,
All right, thank you, everyone. That brings us to agenda item number 12, which is public comment.
okay, as we did at the start of this meeting, I will start with members who are currently physically present. Are there any members of the public who are in the speak, Mr. Whitman? All right, 3 minutes are on the clock.
Okay, sure. So a couple things came up in Captain Durham's report that I wanted, that resonated with me. Both having to do in some way with reimagining. I can remember them both. One was about the incidents of weather-related incidents in, I think, the last month or so. That's one. And he was struck by how many of them there were. They called on the resources of the police. I think it would be good to inquire into the nature of those activities, the percentage of calls that were weather related, what the actions taken by the police department were, just to sort of get some information about that, because it was important enough to him to single that out. That's interesting. Everything about what the police are called on to do in the call for service is of interest to the community. And without without second guessing, without jumping ahead of ourselves, I think the community wants to know what are things that the police are doing that they might not be the most, they might not be required to do. They might be the best folks to do it. We'll see what comes of that, but I think I would like to know that. So I would just leave that for the board and staff to think about. The other one had to do with fair and impartial policing, and I'm glad that Chair Calvita is looking for, pushing for that to get back on track, because that to me is definitely top of the list. When the captain said, I don't know if it's still with us, when the captain said some of these issues are becoming coming into policy. So I didn't, it went by me a little fast. What was he referring to? I'd like to understand that better. But my particular interest has to do with the pretextual stops issue. And I think I mentioned this when I was here last. I know that, and I talked to the public information officer who said that, yeah, the policy is being worked on. It's coming into form. But there have been a few different, there's been at least 2 different versions of that sort of pre-policy document that have floated around, and they're slightly different. I'm really curious to know what are they operating under? I haven't been able to get that information. And then is it nailed down and in writing in the general orders yet? Would be very important. And I'll send out to this group my study, my analysis, which I think I mentioned last time. It's a bit troubling in terms of both, just to finish the sentence, in terms of both how I don't feel that either version of that policy actually reflected the requirement of the city council to reduce the number of stops, types of stops that are done for low-level offenses, nor in looking at the actual data coming after that policy was implemented. I see a lot of these things that are classic cases of low-level offenses that really the city council does not want people to stop for. So, I'll leave with that, but if there's maybe a way that we can get, clarification on what is actually going with the policy, I can talk to you or yes, offline.
Thank you.
Was there any additional public comment? Okay, I'll go ahead with members attending virtually. Is there any members who are currently in the Zoom meeting who would like to provide public comment? At this time, I don't see any raised hands. Last call for public comment. And I see no hands raised.
Excellent. Let's take this one to item 13, which is the case update, which will take a close second. No, we're going to do the next one.
Thank you. You guys want to get a part of the room? Clarify.
No action, no further action is taken during the closed session. Which brings us to agenda item number 14. Do I have a second?